talk about this project that I did for the New York Times called the Pinky Ear Project, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about Chop Chop first. So this is Chop Chop. I started it 4 years ago. I am a cookbook writer. I've been a cookbook writer for like 20 years, and I have a daughter who's now 21 who has a chronic illness. She has pancreatitis, which is like, I don't know if there are any doctors here, but it's like unheard of in children. And I began to feel that writing cookbooks was not enough. Not that there's anything wrong with writing cookbooks, but I began to feel that it wasn't really enough and that I wanted to do something in healthcare. So I called my agent and said, I'm not going to write cookbooks anymore, I'm going to work in healthcare. She said, okay, and I did a couple of projects, but ultimately felt that I actually didn't have the skills to do anything in healthcare. So I went back to writing cookbooks. And at some point, about 5.5 years ago, I thought, I do have the skills to do something meaningful. I can help address obesity by getting doctors to prescribe cooking during well-child visits. As our previous speakers have talked about, it's really essential to get kids started when they're very young. And it seemed like the perfect formula is to have doctors who have so much authority to say to kids, you know, here, this is a really great thing for you to do. And what I did was I originally approached Barry Zuckerman, who was then chief of pediatrics at Boston Medical Center, which is basically an inner city hospital, and said, what do you think of this idea? And he said, I love it. And the truth is, I actually wanted him to hire me to do it, but I didn't say that. So he said, go talk to some more doctors, and every doctor that I talked to said, I love the idea, when can you start? And when I challenged them and said, why are you actually going to do this? You have to talk about seatbelt safety, and you have to talk about helmets, and you have to talk about no smoking, and et cetera, they all said, we're talking about healthy eating and physical activity all day long, but we have no tools. So now, like, we don't know anything about cooking, and now we can hand something to families. So I launched Chop Chop 4 years ago as a nonprofit. And the first issue, nobody got paid, and we printed 150,000 copies, 142,000 of which were requested. So we still, to this day, don't send Chop Chop to anyone who doesn't request it. 50% of the copies are distributed for free. The original idea was for them to be distributed to pediatricians' offices, but it's sort of as soon as we came out, after-school programs, people like Kathy, schools, Indian reservations, food banks, kind of wherever kids are, came and said, we want it too. So we do custom versions, which people pay for, we do bulk sales, we have subscriptions, and then we distribute through pediatricians' offices. We've moved from distributing through pediatricians for free to distributing to either high-risk groups or those who are very low income, which very often is the same group. So Chop Chop is it's a quarterly magazine with the seasons. We have, our message is completely positive, so there's no negative messaging. There's no finger wagging. We don't say, don't do this. It's just do this, it's really fun. And I have had a lot of the same experiences that Kathy talked about where parents say, oh, my kid's not going to eat this, and then the kid makes it, which is the really critical piece. If someone cooks, particularly a child, they want to show off what they did. So first of all, they want to taste it, but they want everybody else to taste it. So for instance, we did little, I don't know that you would call them workshops, but we went to farmers markets during the summer, and we set up little booths where kids could come and make their own salad dressing. And without exception, the kids would say, can we now buy lettuce? Can we now buy cucumbers? And the parents were really, you know this, the parents were really surprised by it, and there were kids who were now requesting salad. So anyway, so the magazine, it's distributed nationally, it's actually distributed internationally, it's also in Spanish. It's been in Spanish since about the second issue. There are a lot of schools that use it as part of the curriculum. Like in math class, if you think about if a recipe serves 4, what do you do to make it serve 2? What do you do to make it serve 8? You can talk about smoothies, and you can talk about fermentation. we asked kids to think about a time that, a meal that they liked. So the thing that's so exciting about cooking is that you can integrate it into almost anything. So we have nurses who use it, we have gym teachers who use it. There's you can use it in any way. So, which leads me to what I'm really supposed to be talking about, which is this Picky Eater project. So since I started Chop Chop, people come up to me all the time and say, my child won't eat, what do I do? And pretty much, it's the #1 question I get, is my child won't eat, what do I do? So I was in my office having a meeting with somebody who at the end of our meeting said to me, she has twin, at that time, 3.5-year-old boys, and she said, ugh, Andrew will only eat hot dogs. And I said, I guess he's doing the grocery shopping too, huh? She kind of went, oh. And I said, if you don't want him to eat it, don't buy it. What's with that? And she kind of was like really embarrassed. This is somebody who's become a very good friend. And she wouldn't even mind my saying her name. But so I said to her, if I could pitch a story to the New York Times, could I follow your family? And she said, sure. So I pitched this idea to the Motherload blog, which I don't know if any of you read, but it's sort of anything to do with parenting. And I pitched this idea, and the editor said to me, it's not one blog, it's 6. I'm like, oh my God, I already have a full-time job, And so I did it, and I did it with Dr. David Ludwig, who is really one of the foremost guys in pediatric obesity. What'd you say? And he's on our board, and I said, would you do this with me? Because he sort of brings the gravitas, I bring the fun. And so we sat down with Christine and sort of said, what's your big problem? And she said what she hated the most was that she would make this really nice meal, and she would sit down, and the boys, first of all, they would come to the table, and before they sat down, they would say, I don't like that. And the funniest part is one of the boys, instead of saying, I don't like that, he always says, I don't love that. So it's just really funny to hear him talk. So he would come to the table, and they would critique everything. There's too much this, I don't like that. But more importantly, they would sit down at the table, and one of the twins would say, I don't want this. Can I have toast? Or, I don't want this, can I have pasta? And Christine would do it. So she was jumping up, she'd make this really nice meal, and she was jumping up all the time, and hating it. And so the first thing that we said to her is, you have to have one meal, and you have to have the strength to say, this is dinner. And she said she would do it. Now, when I started the project, I figured she'd say that she would do it, and she wouldn't. But she did it. So we sat down with her husband, too, and really talked about the ground rules. So the rule being, this is dinner. And that was like the major, major thing. And if you think about poor cultures, you think about the way any of us who are over a certain age grew up, the idea of this is dinner is not very complicated. I mean, it's not like we were asking her to do something, right? I mean, my mother wouldn't have jumped up to get me something. In fact, I became a vegetarian at 14, and my mother said, you better learn how to cook. And I actually credit her with my learning how to cook, because she said, I'm not doing anything special for you. She wasn't nasty about it. She just said, learn how to cook. So anyway, so Christine sat down with these 2 4-year-olds and said, from now on, we're just gonna have one dinner. And they basically didn't resist. I was like, this isn't a very good story. They were so easy. They were so easy. I mean, well, I'm getting to that. So we did this 6-week thing. I mean, they weren't perfect, but, and sometimes they didn't eat dinner. And really, what ended up happening, which was so interesting, I can't remember which of you talked about this. You talked about it. So one was defined as the picky eater, and the other one was defined as the experimental eater, and they switched. There were 2 of them. It was like, there's room here for one picky eater, so you're not it, I'm gonna do it. And all of a sudden, the one who wasn't picky was now like, yeah, he was the one who says, I don't love that. And he goes, I don't love that. But we did a lot of things with them where they got to participate. So the number one thing was they had to cook. So on Fridays, the dad would pick them up from school, and he would take them shopping. And he would say, we're gonna have turkey burgers for dinner, you pick a vegetable, you pick a fruit. So the kids were engaged. And it, like from the first day, the kids had chose the broccoli. So they cooked it and then they ate it. We never had the kids say, I won't eat it. And the other thing was we did a lot of experiments with the boys. So if they were gonna make scrambled eggs, she would put out 4 little bowls of stuff. So she might put out 2 kinds of cheeses and kale and scallions. Actually, the scallions was really funny. She did that on the second day. She's texting me like, oh my God, he's putting all these scallions into this. He's never gonna eat it. He ate everything. Again, because he had made it, which sort of goes back to Chop Chop. If you get them going when they're young, you're really gonna engage them. And that's what we saw. So by the end of this, I mean, we did a bunch of experiments with them. The picky eater now was saying things like, I love salad, and he wasn't just picky about the typical things, but really they were cooking probably 3 meals a week, mostly weekends and then Fridays with the dad, but they were participating. So sometimes she would make, let's say, chili or pasta, the things that would go in it, she put in little bowls so that they could choose. And it made a really big difference. I mean, so what we did was we picked the kinds of things that we knew they liked. So we didn't start out with like super esoteric stuff. So we sort of moved them along slowly, but it was an amazing process. And I'm now actually looking for another picky eater. So I'm serious. So I'm starting it up again in the late spring. No adults. So
10-year-old.
10, perfect.
6
Okay.
and 10-year-old.
Okay.
No, serious.
Okay. So I'm actually serious, right? If you have a picky eater that you are willing to be written about in the New York Times, I don't have to use your last name.
What do you have to lose?
Okay. Write to me at sally@chopchopmag.org. And you have to say why they should be helped. And the one thing that I will say is,
You're like the nanny.
Exactly. So the one thing that I will say though is, if the parent has to, hate to say this in this group, be a parent. The kid does not rule the dinner table. So it's the parent who has to say, this is what we do in this house. So I think I'm almost done, but I just want to say one other thing about cooking and money. And everybody's saying they don't have the time and they don't have, and it's expensive to cook. So you all know about SNAP. I went on a SNAP diet budget for 3 months. And I got $44 a week. And I cooked from scratch. Now I have the skills, but I made very, very simple stuff. And what I say to people all the time is, it's really doable. You know, the time that it takes you to go to the fast food store, place, whatever it's called, fast food restaurant, or, you know, all that kind of stuff. You have to wait online, you have to waste gas, you have to, you know, blah, 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 you have to feel icky later. You can do it. And, you know, cooking is so simple and so much fun. And, you know, in the beginning you said, if you can do one thing. If you can do one thing, it's cook one more night a week. If you have children, teach them how to do something. You don't have to cook every meal. And what we say at Chop Chop is, if you teach them how to cook now, they'll cook for you later.
Yeah.